South Africa's unemployment rate, along with the number of jobless youth, will come under sharp focus today. That's as the second quarter labour force survey will be released by StatsSA following a slight increase in the unemployment rate to 32.9% in the first quarter. Economist Redge Nkosi speaks to us about the dynamics around this matter. Thank you so much for your time, Reg. Let's first ask for your expectation this time around. We saw that uptick with the unemployment rate going up slightly in the previous quarter to 32.9%.
My sense is that we should have an uptick again to somewhere around 33.1 or thereabout, or even just 33, because there's that comma 1. Remember, this number or the unemployment numbers should be taken in a particular context here. The economy as a whole is not performing, and we expect in 2023 the economy to be performing at about 0.4%. That is largely because of the poor monetary policy that we've been having in the recent past until the last quarter, when we have it frozen almost. So monetary austerity planting unemployment time bombs right across up to now. Fiscal austerity that we've had, again, planting unemployment time bombs right up to now. We cannot expect, therefore, this economy to be performing in the manner it should perform, given all these time bombs, rather these unemployment time bombs that the government, Treasury and the Reserve Bank have been planting for quite a number of months now.
Reg, what would another uptick and a consecutive one in this quarter mean for South Africa's status where high unemployment is concerned? Traditionally, across the globe, South Africa's joblessness has been at the highest levels for over a decade.
It's one of the highest in the world, isn't it? And obviously, another uptick shall obviously mean that the country is walking closer and closer to social chaos. The North Africa issues that befell the rest of the continent, we know that South Africa is really teetering on that edge. And should we have a country that continually, as in fact all indications point, that employment will be going up, frankly, we should be all worried. We should, in 2026, have unemployment in the ranges of 36%. So there is no way we're going to see any let-up in this. I think South Africa is heading, quite frankly, in a very dim place in the next coming few months and years.
You mentioned some state agencies from the National Treasury to the Reserve Bank alluding to something's got to give to avoid reaching what you referenced as time bombs. What is there to be done by these state entities?
For example, there's no need for the Reserve Bank to be increasing interest rates. What that means for the economy as well means actually they're killing the economy even more. There's no need for the Reserve Bank to use the interest rate, as a tool to cool down inflation. You don't have to do that when much of the inflation comes from the supply side. You cannot, request, OPEC to downgrade the prices of petrol by you increasing interest rates here. It just doesn't work. Logistics nightmares that have been afflicting the entire world are not going to be stopped by Reserve Bank having to increase rates. There are many other tools that can be used to cool down inflation from the supply side. Unfortunately, the Reserve Bank only knows one tool, and it proudly tells us that we can only fight using this tool. Quite frankly, that's dumb.
Interesting that you mentioned monetary policy as a contributing factor to the domino effect that ultimately also gets to a point of South Africa's high unemployment rate. But I must ask about the role of Treasury, especially as we are fast approaching October. And that's where we will hear from the medium-term budget policy statement. It's likely to be completely different from what we heard earlier on this year. In the February budget, much has changed. The labour landscape has also flipped on its head.
Well, I expect the Minister of Finance, who is the overall head of financial issues in the country, to even reign over the Reserve Bank, even if there is independence. By the way, the Minister is in charge at the end of the day. And we expect him in the next coming months, or this October, to tell us something good. But unfortunately, the line is wrong. Treasury is unlikely to tell us anything sensible that's going to make things better for the economy. We are unlikely to see anything coming from there because, remember, these are issues that are cast, according to them, in some form of stone. And therefore, they cannot throw this stone away or break this stone away. IMF, World Bank agreements they have talk to the economy that is really, really tight. So whether we're going to have this mini budget coming up in October, I don't see any movement that are going to be positive for this economy at all.
So is it a surprise that South Africa has a record high youth unemployment? If the argument of the joblessness of the South African youth over more than 10 years is spoken about, why is it that there have been such impediments and maybe a lack of political will to ensure that the situation is turned around? It seems as if it is ingrained within a South African culture and maybe the nature of the current economics of the country.
Well, fundamentally, all this boils down to the economic framework that we have. Remember, this framework is not South African economic framework. It is adopted by South Africa, the Treasury, and of course the Reserve Bank. This is the manufactured or imposed, if you want, economic framework. And we cannot continuously use this economic framework unless we want the mess that we are now facing and the mess that we are likely to face going forward. There ought to be an immediate shift from the current monetary system, monetary policy system, monetary policy framework, as well as the fiscal framework as well. So the entire macroeconomic framework that South Africa operates with is defunct, as many of us or many economists have actually said. And unless that changes, which is unlikely because the Reserve Bank and Treasury look to the IMF and the World Bank as the macroeconomic godfathers. And unfortunately, there's no country that has followed those institutions that has ever produced anything meaningful for their economies.
Let's also talk about the gender side of this particular coin in this discussion. Reg, it's still Women's Month, but in South Africa, we know when we get figures such as the Quarterly Labour Force Survey, the face of the unemployed also includes the black South African female. What's to be said there?
Well, to me, unfortunately, this is the case. You talked of unemployment among our youth, which is quite high. And in fact, this is also spreading right across our neighbors because our framework operates right across much of, the SACU area. Women are affected quite badly and they continue to be affected. Yet, we're again in a Women's Month celebrating what? Celebrating pain? I think South Africa has to revisit this. If the entire Parliament cannot begin to see that there's something wrong with this framework, then I'm afraid there's no hope. So our women will continue to suffer, our young people will continue to suffer, and the rest of the economy with it will be going down the drain unless, and indeed, as we say, some fundamental changes are done. And the president has to take note of this. He cannot be sitting there allowing these things to be happening to the women of the country and indeed to the youth. Frankly, something has to be done, and that has to be done pretty urgently.
Lastly, Reg, can there be hope that this narrative of record high unemployment in South Africa will someday be a thing of the past?
Not someday, not in the next coming 3, 4, 5 years. In our own predictions, we look at this situation going on for another decade. Unless, again, as I said, fundamental shifts are done by the government. So there's no respite for this. We're going to go forward. The World Bank itself has come up with the numbers of about 36% unemployment in the country in the next coming 2-3 years. Exactly the same thing with the IMF. Again, Treasury as well as the Reserve Bank tell us these numbers are going to be, but they tell us that they're doing all they can in terms of shifting this by employing what they call structural reforms. But structural reforms are incapable of addressing a macroeconomic issue or issues that bedevil the economy. To apply microeconomic reforms to macroeconomic challenges doesn't work, does never worked. And South Africa will continue, therefore, to be in this problem for many, many years to come.
Thank you for your insights. Redge Nkosi is an economist with First Source Money talking to us there as we build up to the expectation of the second quarter labour force survey to be released by StatsSA later today. It will also reveal the unemployment rate.